Hey guys, so as you can see here, I had just painted this a couple of days ago, and you can see here that I haven't gotten the result I wanted. So basically this is a new paper and I wanted to try out different techniques on it, including scraping and including trying to remove some color, as you can see here. And there's a mess over here too. This is from the tag, the price tag. So I have a complete mess over here. So in some cases, you also, in many instances, you end up in a similar situation in cases where you have tried to do something and then you come back after 2 or 3 days and you see that you have made a mess and you go away and throw the paper. So instead of this, I will give you 4 different ways you can salvage a painting. So there are many ways. Let's start by the first way. The first way is basically using the other side of the paper, which is the easiest to do. Like you flip the paper, as you can see here, the back side is untouched. So some papers even come like sized on both sides, so you can use the other way too. Now this is the first and easiest way. The other method is grabbing one of these. Let me just grab them. You can grab one of these, which is a magic eraser, and you can basically try to remove as much of the paint as you have, like to retrieve the white of the paper. But this is quite damaging to the paper, and this will leave you with like nasty marks, and sometimes it will tear the paper, especially like this paper, which is not so thick, and this will cause inconsistency when you're trying to repaint it. A third way that you might be familiar, which is kind of cheating but it also works, which is basically using an opaque medium like gouache, as I have here. You can put a bit of gouache on top of it, white gouache, and you basically cover this, and then what you do is you can reuse it, like try to mask the places. Like if you're going to do like a green hill over here, you use opaque mediums, but that is somehow cheating in a way, and it's like it counteracts with the actual benefit of like using watercolor in the first place, and you're basically using another medium. So the fourth way that I will be doing here is trying to look into the painting and seeing where the painting somehow lacks some of the darks and some of the highlights, and try to somehow use all the 3 methods that I mentioned: the magic eraser, the gouache method, and the idea of trying to reuse the places that I can. For example, here I can try to use the magic eraser to remove this. I don't know if the camera can pick up, but I can try to remove this mark that the price tag has left. I can retrieve some highlights with the magic eraser or gouache in the worst case, and I try to change the hues of the sky, make it more blue, the sea, make it, or the lake here, I can make it more dark and add a bit of waves. And for this marks that I have left by scratching the paper, I can try to somehow modify it or add different stuff so that it could actually have a similar feel, but it would be as if like a new painting. So I'm doing this because sometimes you just don't want to get rid of the painting and you just want to like modify it, and sometimes you're left with this. And it's good practice because it will increase your knowledge with different, like trying to fix some of the mistakes, while since watercolor is not so forgiving. And also it will help you to grasp the watercolor as a medium in a better way and find creative ways to manipulate some of the things that you have painted and try either to improve them or try to change them in a way that you that are fairly new or adding a different style. So stay tuned. I will be doing a commentary over my process here, and I hope you like it. So let's get into the painting process. So guys, as you can see here, I decided to do a time-lapse video to make the video as compact as possible and also cover the key points and explain to you my thought process during the whole painting. So as you can see here, I am using phthalo blue, and the reason I'm using this phthalo blue instead of ultramarine or something darker is because I don't want the sky to get even more darker than it is now. You can also notice that the tag that was pasted on the paper has left a mark on the paper, and I'm trying to remove that, so I'll be using this magic eraser. But as I use, since the paper is not of high quality, that means it's not cotton paper, the paper is flaking off, and that's a bad situation. So I decide not to go with the magic eraser route, and I decide to mix green mix that is also a bright green instead of it being like a dark one, so that it won't even darker the painting even more. And I decide to come in with a bit of white to mask the harsh marks of the tag. And as you can see, the white gouache is doing quite well, and I'm really pleased with the result. So I continue and move up to the sky and try to cover that part also, and I see that it mostly covered the mark and I was successful in that phase. So I noticed that the lake is quite light, especially compared to the sky and the background, since I have darkened them. So I move in with a mixture of phthalo blue and phthalo green and start darkening the foreground, and I start going darker and darker as I go to the background, since usually lakes and seas have this natural tendency to be lighter in the foreground and darker in the background. And now I go into a bit of a dark red, which is a dark maroon. In this case it's Indian yellow, and I decide to go and paint the horizon. I want this to be darkened a bit so that not only I can show a bit of foliage in the background, but also give this idea of or notion of depth of field, since as we go deeper into the nature or like a field, the horizon gets darker and darker. And since this is more of a, I'm going to do it more of a sunset version, like a sunset scene, the sunset will be darker as the sun sets. So this reddish color will be darker on the horizon line. Now I'm adding a bit of detail to the trees also. I don't want a lot of detail since it's quite far away. Now it's not as far as the background, the hills, but it's quite far, so I'm just hinting for some like branches and stuff. And I use the same mix to add a bit of vegetation on both sides of the lake, and then I decide to move on the field, and that's why I use a bit of ultramarine this time with a bit of phthalo green and azo yellow to make a not so bright green but more of a muted green. And I decide to find a way to hide those streaks, as you can see the dark streaks that I had previously tested the paper on, and those streaks were actually done by carving or trying to dent the paper, and that's why they're quite dark. So I decided to make it more, to add a bit of life to it and hint that they are actually grass and foliage. So that's why I decided to go with this dark greenish brownish color. As you can see here, I'm adding a bit of like areas of greenery under each dark area. I'm also doing this on both sides by varying a bit of the color. As you can see here, I'm playing between different colors and including phthalo blues and a bit of ultramarine and azo green, and this is to add visual interest for the viewer instead of it being monotone. And it's good to note that while I'm adding the greens, I'm also adding a bit of Indian red to show that there are like soil and stuff underneath it, like gravel, since I don't want it to be like pure green. And I also want to note that the colors that I'm using are actually from Graham, and only the Indian red is from Schmincke. And now you can see I'm adding more of a brighter green on both sides of the lake. And the reason for using a brighter green near the lake is because usually the greenery and vegetation around the lake is usually more alive and fresh. That's why it's more likely for them to be bright green instead of a darker green and less soily. So that's why you can see more of the vegetation and greenery, as you can see here. And as I'm going farther from the center or from the lake, you see me adding more of the reddish Indian red to give more of a hint that the vegetation is a bit less. And now I'm also adding a bit of foliage in the mid background, as you can see. And now I decide, since the layer has dried at the background, I decide to go on another layer, add another layer, more of a darker layer for the more foreground and lightest green for the farthest background. And now I add a bit more blue to both sides of the painting to give this vignette effect so that the viewer would concentrate more on the center of the painting. Finally, I decide to work on the sky since I feel that it's so barren, so I add a bit of clouds. And you can notice here the farthest clouds are actually the smallest, and that's to preserve the perspective and the depth of field, since farther objects from the foreground they become smaller, and as I move to the foreground they become bigger. So that's why you can see that the clouds are actually small and cluttered in the farthest place in the painting, and as they approach the viewer or the foreground they become bigger, and also they become a bit of darker. So while the sky is drying, I decide to work more on the lake, and I come in by a bit of ultramarine and add a bit of wave, since I feel that the lake is so dry somehow and it has like a monotone color, so I add a bit of darker hues to indicate waves and movement in the painting. I'm also adding a bit of texture in the mid background to just add a bit of visual interest, and so that the whole wash is not a plain dark green wash. And I'm adding a bit of details here and there just like to extend the viewer's interest and add visual interest to the viewer. But at this point the painting is mostly done. Now I go in to add a bit of highlights on the lake, and I also use the gouache, as you can see here, the same gouache that I used to cover the tag. And these finishing touches actually make the water more lively and more and shows motion, as you can see here. I also retrieve some highlights in the background and the tree that I lost by painting. Finally, I go with a bit of ultramarine to lessen the bright green in the background, since I feel that it's too bright for the whole composition and color balance of the painting. And I add bits and pieces around the painting, just small like minor tweaks, nothing major, just to add more like details. But this is something personal I like to do just to make the painting more visually interesting. And at this point you can call it a day and let the painting rest, since there's a fine line. If you keep on working, you will overwork the painting, and I might have gone to a bit of overwork here, but I always try to make myself stop from overworking, since that could actually carry a painting from being a very great painting to a very bad one. So as you can see here, I'm adding the last highlights on the cloud, and I'm basically done. So guys, as you can see, this is the final result. I will not be doing more of work since it would be more overworking it. As you can see that the painting was somehow dead and lifeless, and I tried my best to give it more life by adding some features and extending the foliage and stuff. And keep in mind that this is not cotton paper, this is actually pulp paper, which is harder to deal with. As you can see, there were some tear downs here and here, and this is also possible with cotton paper, which would be easier since you can use the magic eraser more frequently and without fear of damaging the paper. This is more precious, the paper, and it's more delicate. So I tried my best to salvage the painting, and I'm really happy with the result I got. And I think this is way better than what I started with, and I feel that this painting is more, now it's enhanced. I love the details, the contrast I added to the painting. And if you would like me to do more of these kinds of paintings, salvaging some paintings and stuff, please don't hesitate to leave them down in the comment section below. I'll be happy to do them. And don't forget, every painter and artist has those type of bad paintings, and it's okay to like go back to them and try to change them. And it's totally fine to try to take a different approach and stuff to the same painting. And even if I done a painting, like even if I molded it and modified it and I didn't like it, at least it will be a good experiment and exercise for me to increase my watercolor skills and my ways of knowing how much I can stretch watercolor and bend the laws. So keep safe, guys, keep on painting and never get discouraged. I hope you try these types of methods more and practice more, and I hope to see you later. Bye.